What was the Holy Family's flight into Egypt like? Did angels accompany them? Were fallen angels, demons, part of their journey? Did the Most Blessed Virgin Mary and Saint Joseph have concerns over food and water as they traveled through the harsh wilderness of the desert? Did baby Jesus perform any miracles in Egypt? Through divine contemplation and mind-blowing heavenly visions, an amazing church mystic provides answers to these fascinating questions. In an extraordinary mystical heavenly revelation, Venerable Mary of Agreda vividly describes the flight of the Holy Family into Egypt. Join me as Virgo Potens presents The Mystical City of God, Book 4, Chapter 8, by Venerable Mary of Agreda. Book 4, Chapter 8, The Flight to Egypt. Our heavenly pilgrims left Jerusalem and entered upon their banishment, while yet the silence and obscurity of night held sway. They were full of solicitude for the pledge of heaven, which they carried with them into a strange and unknown land. Although faith and hope strengthened them, for in no other beings could these virtues be more firmly and securely established than in our Queen and her most faithful spouse. Nevertheless, the Lord afforded them occasion for anxiety. Their love for the infant Jesus would naturally excite in them anxiety and suffering on an occasion like this. They knew not what would happen during such a long journey, nor when it should end, nor how they would fare in Egypt, where they would be entire strangers, nor what comfort or convenience they would find there raising the child, nor even how they would be able to ward off great sufferings from him on the way to Egypt. Therefore, the hearts of these holy parents were filled with many misgivings and anxious thoughts when they parted with so much haste from their lodging place. But their sorrow was much relieved when the 10,000 heavenly courtiers above, mentioned again, appeared to them in human forms and in their former splendor and beauty, and when they again changed the night into the brightest day for the holy pilgrims. As they set forth from the portals of the city, the holy angels humiliated themselves and adored the incarnate Word in the arms of the Virgin Mother. They also encouraged her again by offering their homage and service, stating that it was the will of the Lord that they guide and accompany her on the journey. In this town of Gaza they remained 2 days, for Saint Joseph and the beast of burden which carried the Queen were worn out by the fatigue of the journey. From that place they sent back the servant of Saint Elizabeth, taking care to caution him not to tell anyone of their whereabouts. But God provided still more effectually against this danger, for he took away from this man all remembrance of what Saint Joseph had charged them to conceal, so that he retained only his message to Saint Elizabeth. Most Holy Mary expended the presents sent by Elizabeth in entertaining the poor, for she, who was the mother of the poor, could not bear to pass them by unassisted. Of the clothes sent to her, she made a cloak for the divine infant, and one for Saint Joseph, to shelter them from the discomforts of the season and of the journey. She also used other things in their possession for the comfort of her child and of Saint Joseph. The most prudent virgin would not rely on miraculous assistance whenever she could provide for the daily needs by her own diligence and labor, for in these matters she designed to subject herself to the natural order and depend upon her own efforts. During the 2 days which they spent in that city, the most pure Mary, in order to enrich it with great blessings, performed some wonderful deeds. She freed 2 sick persons from the danger of death and cured their ailments. She restored to another person, a crippled woman, the use of her limbs. In the souls of many who met her and conversed with her, she caused divine effects of the knowledge of God and of the change of life. All of them felt themselves moved to praise their Creator. But neither Mary nor Joseph spoke a word about their native country, nor of the destination or object of their journey. For if this information had been added to the public notice caused by their wonderful actions, the attention of Herod's agents might have been drawn toward them, and they might have found sufficient inducement to follow them after their departure. On the third day after our pilgrims had touched Gaza, they departed from that city for Egypt. Soon leaving the inhabited parts of Palestine, they entered the sandy deserts of Bersabe, which they were obliged to traverse for 60 leagues in order to arrive and take their abode in Heliopolis, the present Cairo in Egypt. This journey through the desert consumed a number of days, for the distance they could travel each day was but short, not only on account of the laborious progress over the deep sand, but also on account of the hardships occasioned by the want of shelter. There were many incidents on their way through this solitude. I will mention some of them, from which others can be conjectured, for it is not necessary to relate all of them. In order to understand how much Mary and Joseph, and also the infant Jesus suffered on their pilgrimage, it must be remembered that the Almighty permitted His only begotten, with His most holy Mother and Saint Joseph, to suffer the inconvenience and hardships naturally connected with travel through this desert. And although the Heavenly Lady made no complaints, yet she was much afflicted, which was also true of her most faithful husband. For both of them suffered many personal inconveniences and discomforts, while the mother, in addition thereto, was afflicted still more on account of the sufferings of her son and of Saint Joseph. And the latter was deeply grieved not to be able, by his diligence and care, to ease the hardships of the child and his spouse. During all this journey of 60 leagues through the desert, they had no other night shelter than the sky and open air. Moreover, it was in the time of winter, for the journey took place in the month of February, only 6 days after the purification, as was indicated in the last chapter. In the first night of these sandy plains, they rested at the foot of a small hill, this being the only protection they could find. The Queen of Heaven, with the child in her arms, seated herself on the earth, and with her husband she ate the food brought with them from Gaza. The Empress of Heaven also nursed the infant Jesus at her breast, and he, on his part, rejoiced his mother and her husband by his contentment, in order to furnish them with some kind of shelter against the open air. However narrow and humble it might be, Saint Joseph formed a sort of tent for the divine Word and the Most Holy Mary by means of his cloak and some sticks. During that night the 10,000 angels who, full of marvel, assisted these earthly pilgrims in visible human shapes, formed a guard around their king and queen. The great lady perceived that her divine Son offered up to the Eternal Father the hardships and labors both of himself and of Mary and of Joseph. In these prayers and in the other acts of his deified soul, the Queen joined him for the greater part of the night. The divine infant slept for a short time in her arms, while she continued wakeful and engaged in heavenly conversations with the Most High and his angels. Saint Joseph slept upon the ground, resting his head upon the chest, which contained the clothing and other articles of the baggage. On the next day they pursued their journey, and their little store of fruit and bread was soon exhausted, that they began to suffer great want and to feel the hunger. Although Joseph was more deeply concerned, yet both of them felt this privation very much. On one of the first days of their journey, they partook of no sustenance until 9 o'clock at night, not having any more even of the coarse and poor food which until then had sustained them in their hardships and labor. as nature demanded some refreshment after the exertion and weariness of travel, and as there was no way of supplying their want by natural means, the heavenly lady addressed herself to the Most High in these words: Eternal, great and powerful God, I give thee thanks and bless thee for thy magnificent bounty, and also that, without my merits, only on account of thy merciful condescension, thou gavest me life and being, and preservest me in it, though I am but dust and a useless creature. I have not made a proper return for all these benefits. Therefore how can I ask for myself what I cannot repay? But, my Lord and Father, look upon thy only begotten, and grant me what is necessary to sustain my natural life and also that of my spouse, so that I may serve thy majesty and thy word made flesh for the salvation of men. In order that the clamors of the sweetest mother might proceed from yet greater tribulation, the Most High permitted elements to afflict them more than at other times, and in addition to the sufferings caused by their fatigue, destitution, and hunger. For there arose a storm of wind and rain, which harassed and blinded them by its fury. This hardship grieved still more the tender-hearted and loving mother, on account of the delicate child, which was not yet 50 days old. Although she tried to cover and protect him as much as possible, yet she could not prevent him from feeling the inclemency of the weather, so that he shed tears and shivered from the cold in the same manner as other children are wont to do. Then the anxious mother, making use of her power as queen and mistress of creatures, commanded the elements not to afflict their Creator, but to afford him shelter and refreshment, and wreak their vengeance upon her alone. And as related once before, at the occasion of the birth of Christ and of the journey to Jerusalem, again the wind immediately moderated, and the storm abated, not daring to approach mother and child. In return for this loving forethought, the infant Jesus commanded his angels to assist his kindest mother, and to serve her as a shield against the inclement weather. They immediately complied, and constructed a resplendent and beautiful globe round about and over their incarnate God, his mother, and her spouse. In this they were protected and defended more effectually than all the wealthy and powerful of the world in their palaces and rich garments. The same they did several times during the journey through the desert. Nevertheless, they were in want of food, and they were destitute of other things unprovidable by their own mere human effort. But the Lord allowed them to fall into this need, in order that, listening to the acceptable prayers of his spouse, he might make provision also for this by the hands of the angels. They brought them delicious bread and well-seasoned fruits, and moreover a most delicious drink, all of which they administered and served with their own hands. Then all of them together sang hymns of praise and thanksgiving to the Lord, who gives food to all creatures at opportune times, in order that the poor may eat and be filled, whose eyes and hopes are fixed upon his kingly providence and bounty. Of such a kind was the delicate feast, with which the Lord regaled his 3 exiled wanderers in the desert of Bersabe. It was the same desert in which Elijah, fleeing from Jezebel, was comforted by the hearth cake, brought to him by the angel in order that he might travel to Horeb Mount. So then the infant Jesus, with his mother and Saint Joseph, reached the inhabited country of Egypt. On entering the towns, the divine infant, in the arms of his mother, raised his eyes and his hands to the Father, asking for the salvation of these inhabitants held captive by Satan. And immediately he made use of his sovereign and divine power, and drove the demons from the idols, and hurled them to the infernal abyss. Like lightning flashed from the clouds, they darted forth and descended to the lowermost caverns of hell and darkness. At the same instant the idols crashed to the ground, the altars fell to pieces, and the temples crumbled to ruins. The cause of these marvelous effects were known to the Heavenly Lady, for she united her prayers with those of her most holy Son as cooperatrix of his salvation. Saint Joseph also knew this to be the work of the incarnate Word, and he praised and extolled him in holy admiration. But the demons, although they felt the divine power, knew not whence this power proceeded. The Egyptian people were astounded at these inexplicable happenings, although among the more learned, ever since the sojourn of Jeremiah in Egypt, an ancient tradition was current that a king of the Jews would come, and that the temples of the idols would be destroyed. Yet of this prophecy the common people had no knowledge, nor did the learned know how it was to be fulfilled, and therefore the terror and confusion was spread among all of them, as was prophesied by Isaiah. In this disturbance and fear, some, reflecting on these events, came to our great Lady and Saint Joseph, and, in their curiosity at seeing these strangers in their midst, they also spoke to them about the ruin of their temples and their idols. Making use of this occasion, the Mother of Wisdom began to undeceive these people, speaking to them of the true God and teaching them that He is the one and only Creator of heaven and earth, who is alone to be adored and acknowledged as God, that all others are but false and deceitful gods, nothing more than the wood or clay or metal of which they are made, having neither eyes nor ears nor any power, that the same artisans that made them, and any other man, could destroy them all at pleasure, since any man is more noble and powerful than they, that the oracles which they gave forth were answers of the lying and deceitful demons within them, and that the latter had no power, since there is but one true God. The Heavenly Lady was so sweet and kind in her words, and at the same time so full of life and force, her appearance was so charming, and all her intercourse was accompanied by such salutary effects, that the rumor of the arrival of these strange pilgrims quickly spread about in the different towns, and many people gathered to see and hear them. Moreover, the powerful prayers of the incarnate Word wrought a change of hearts, and the crumbling of the idols caused an incredible commotion among these people, instilling into their minds knowledge of the true God and sorrow for their sins, without their knowing whence or through whom these blessings came to them. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph pursued their way through many towns of Egypt, performing these and many other miracles, driving out the demons, not only from the idols, but out of many bodies possessed by them, curing many that were grievously and dangerously ill, enlightening the hearts of the doctrines of truth and eternal life. By these temporal benefits and others, so effectual in moving the ignorant, earthly-minded people, many were drawn to listen to the instructions of Mary and Joseph concerning a good and salutary life. The traditions which in many parts of Egypt kept alive the remembrance and wonders wrought by the incarnate Word gave rise to differences of opinion among the sacred and other writers in regard to the city in which our exiles lived during their stay in Egypt. Some of them assert that they dwelt in this city, some in another, but all of them may be right and in accordance with facts, since each one may be speaking of a different period of the sojourn of our pilgrims in Memphis or Babylon of Egypt. For they visited not only these cities, but many others. I, for my part, have been informed that they passed through these and then reached Heliopolis, where they took up their abode. There holy guardian angels instructed the heavenly Queen and Saint Joseph, and they were to settle in this city. For besides the ruin of the temples and idols, which, just as in other places, took place at their arrival here, the Lord had resolved to perform still other miracles for his glory and for the rescue of souls. And the inhabitants of this city, according to the good fortune already prognosticated in its name as the City of the Sun, were to see the sun of justice and grace arise over them and shine upon them. Following these orders, Saint Joseph sought to purchase for a suitable price some dwelling in the neighborhood, and the Lord ordained that he should find a poor and humble, yet serviceable house at some small distance from the city, such as the Queen of Heaven desired. The most prudent lady and her spouse, forsaken and destitute of all temporal help, accommodated themselves joyfully to the poverty of their little dwelling. Of the 3 rooms which it contained, they assigned one to be the sanctuary or temple of the infant Jesus, under the tender care of the most pure mother. There they placed the cradle and her bare couch, until, after some days, by the labor of the holy spouse, and through the kindness of some pious women, they could obtain wherewith to cover it. Another room was set aside for the sleeping place and oratory of Saint Joseph. The third served as a workshop for plying his trade. In view of their great poverty, and of the great difficulty of sufficient employment as a carpenter, the great lady resolved to assist him by the work of her hands to earn a livelihood. She immediately executed her resolve by seeking to obtain needlework through the intervention of the pious women, who, attracted by her modesty and sweetness, were beginning to have intercourse with her, as all that she attended to or busied herself with was so perfect. The reputation of her skill soon spread about, so that she never was in want of employment, whereby to eke out the slender means of livelihood for her Son, the true God and man. In order to obtain the indispensable necessary foods and clothing, furnish the house ever so moderately, and pay the necessary expenses, it seemed to our Queen that she must employ all day in work and consume the night in attending to her spiritual exercises. This she resolved upon, not for any motives of gain, or because she did not continue in her contemplations during the day, for this was her incessant occupation in the presence of the infant God, as I have so often said and shall repeat hereafter. But some of the hours, which she was wont to spend in special exercises, she wished to transfer to the night time, in order to be able to extend the hours of manual labor, not being minded to ask or expect God's miraculous assistance for anything which she could attain by greater diligence and additional labor on her own part. In all such cases, we ask for miraculous help more for our own convenience than on account of necessity. The most prudent queen asked the Eternal Father to provide sustenance for her divine Son, but at the same time she continued to labor. Like one who does not trust in herself or in her own efforts, she united prayer with her labors in order to obtain the necessities of life like other men. On account of the excessive heat prevailing in Egypt, and on account of many disorders rampant among the people, the distempers of the Egyptians were widespread and grievous. During the years of the stay of the infant Jesus and his most holy mother, pestilence devastated Heliopolis and other places. On this account, and on account of the report of their wonderful deeds, multitudes of people came to them from all parts of the country and returned home, cured in body and soul. In order that the grace of the Lord might flow more abundantly, and in order that his kindest mother might have assistance in her works of mercy, God, at the insistence of the Heavenly Mistress, ordained Saint Joseph as her helper in teaching and healing of the infirm. For this purpose he was endowed with new light and power of healing. The Holy Mary began to make use of his assistance in the 3rd year of their stay in Egypt, so that now he ordinarily taught and cured the men, while the Blessed Lady attended to the women. Incredible was the fruit resulting from their labors in the souls of men, and for her uninterrupted beneficence, and the gracious efficacy of her words drew all toward our Queen, and her modesty and holiness filled them with devoted love. They offered her many presents and large possessions, anxious to see her make use of them, but never did she receive anything for herself, or reserve it for her own use, for they continued to provide for their wants by the labor of her hands and the earnings of Saint Joseph. When, at the time, the Blessed Lady was offered some gift that seemed serviceable and proper for helping the needy and the poor, she would accept it for that purpose. Only with this understanding would she ever yield to the pious and affectionate importunities of devout persons, and even then she would make them a present in return of things made by her own hands. From what I have related, we can form some idea how great and how numerous were the miracles wrought by the Holy Family during their 7 years' stay in Egypt, in Heliopolis, for it would be impossible to enumerate and describe all of them. Neither the tongue of creatures can describe nor intellect comprehend the vast merits and increase of sanctity accumulating in the most Holy Mary through these continued and wonderful works. For in all things she acted with a prudence more than angelic. What moved her to the greatest admiration, love, and praise of the Almighty was to see how, at the intercession of herself and her Son for the holy innocents, his providence showed itself so liberal toward them. She knew, as if she was present, the great number of children that were killed, and that all of them, though some were only 8 days, 2 or 6 months old, and none of them were over 2 years, had the use of their reason, that they all received a high knowledge of the being of God, perfect love, faith, and hope, with which they performed heroic acts of faith, worship, and love of God, reverence and compassion for their parents. They prayed for their parents, and, in reward for their sufferings, obtained for them light and grace for advance in spiritual things. They willingly submitted to martyrdom, in spite of the tenderness of their age, which made their sufferings so much the greater, and consequently augmented their merits. A multitude of angels assisted them, and bore them to Limbo, or to the bosom of Abraham. By their arrival they rejoiced the holy ancients, and confirmed them in the hope of speedy liberation. All these were effects of the prayers of the divine child and his mother. Aware of all these wonders, she was inflamed with ardor and exclaimed, "Praise the Lord, ye children!" and joined them in their praise of the author of these magnificent works, so worthy of his goodness and omnipotence. Mary alone knew of them and appreciated them properly. Words of the Holy Queen of Heaven. My daughter, in what thou hast written, I wish that thou learn a lesson from the very sorrow and apprehension with which thou hast performed this task. Well founded is thy sorrow, to see how such a noble creature as man, made according to the likeness and image of the Lord, endowed with such divine qualities, and gifted with the power of knowing, loving, seeing, and enjoying God eternally, should allow himself to be degraded and defiled by such brutal and abominable passions as to shed the innocent blood of those who can do no harm to anyone. This should induce thee to weep over the ruin of so many souls, especially in the times in which thou livest, when that same ambition which incited Herod has enkindled such great hatred and enmity among the children of the Church, occasioning the ruin of countless souls, and causing the waste and loss of the blood of my most holy Son, poured out for the salvation of men, do thou bitterly deplore this loss. But likewise be warned by what thou hast seen in others. Ponder the effects of passions admitted into the heart. For if once they have mastered the heart, they will either smother it in lust when it finds success, or consume it with wrath at meeting any opposition. Fear thou, my daughter, this danger, not only on account of the results thou seest of ambition in Herod, but also in account of what thou seest going on every hour in other persons. Be very careful not to allow thyself to be mastered by anything, be it ever so small. For in order to start a great conflagration, the smallest spark is sufficient. I have often repeated to thee this same warning, and I shall continue to do so more often in the future. For the greatest difficulty in practicing virtue consists in dying to all that is pleasurable to the senses. Thou canst not be a fit instrument in the hands of the Lord, such as he desires thee to be, if thou dost not cleanse thy faculties, even of the images of all creatures, so that they do not find entrance into thy desires. I wish it to be to thee an inexorable law that all things, except God, his angels and saints, be to thee as if they did not exist. These should be thy sole possession. On this account the Lord has opened to thee his secrets, honors thee with his familiarity and intimacy, and for this purpose also do I honor thee with mine, that thou neither live nor wish to live without the Lord. Thanks for stopping by and watching my video to the end. Please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Doing so really helps me to reach more souls. If you enjoyed this video, or think that this work may be helpful for others, please consider supporting me through Patreon. Or, if you would prefer making a one-time contribution, just click on the Super Thanks icon below the video title. Your generous support helps to keep this channel going. To everyone who watches my videos and/or supports me, I offer my sincere gratitude. May God bless you.